This presentation is going to be about interest groups, which is chapter 9. Interest groups are a group of people who care very passionately about a specific issue, and they share the same views on this issue, and they work to shape public policy. So, for example, we have interest groups focused on the environment, education, gun rights, animal rights, whatever the issue is. The interest group members work together to try to get attention for their issue and to try to get policies shaped to support their beliefs. Okay, and interest groups work at every level of the government. So this means locally, at the state level, and at the national level as well. Interest groups are not political parties. They work together with political parties, but they don't have the same goals and they don't do the same things. Interest groups do not nominate candidates for office. So when we covered political parties, we talked about their main goal is to win office, win those government seats. Members of interest groups, they are not running up for election. They don't want to actually be in the government. They just want to influence those who are in the government. So their main concern is not winning elections, but shaping public policy and working with those who have won elections to get them to pass laws in their favor. Okay. Also, interest groups focus on just their main issue. Political parties focus on a broad range of issues because they want to get more votes and to get attention from people, where so they focus on lots of different issues. Interest groups focus on their specific issue, and they tend to become very knowledgeable about the topic because it's just their one issue. So early on in our country's history, our founders did not like the idea of interest groups. They were called factions. And so just like we talked about how our founders didn't like political parties, they also didn't like interest groups. They believed that if interest groups became too powerful, they would start to dominate the government, and so they believed that they would start to kind of like take over decision making based on which groups were more powerful or had the most money. However, interest groups do serve some valuable functions. They do raise awareness on different issues that are important, and they also provide useful information about topics. Okay, so if you wanted to learn about the environment, you've got groups that have done research or who are very knowledgeable about this topic, and you'd be able to get information about it. However, interest groups do receive criticism for pushing their own interests, not seeing both sides of an issue. So interest groups do sometimes tend to come off as being a little more biased because they're on one side of an issue. And they often focus on not what's in the best interest of the country as a whole, but what's on the best interest of their topic or their issue. So these are some of the criticisms that interest groups receive. Interest groups are also sometimes criticized for using bribery or like unethical methods to try to get laws passed in their favor. Okay, so influence the government. One way this is done is called lobbying. So this is the direct approach. Lobbying is when members of an interest group attempt to influence policymakers to try to get them, again, to pass these policies. This occurs on all levels of government, at the federal level, state, and local levels. So, lobbyists do target all three branches of government. When lobbyists target Congress, what usually happens, so Congress, remember, that's the branch of government that actually writes the laws. So interest group members will often contact senators and representatives to tell them, hey, I want you to pass a policy about this topic, and try to get laws passed in their favor. So let's say an interest group is focused on the environment, climate change. So they'll try to get some climate change legislation passed, and they'll talk to senators and representatives to try to convince them to pass laws in that way. They often go to congressional sessions. So when the legislature meets, they'll often talk and give speeches to try to convince legislators to adopt these policies. Sometimes they'll prepare statements, or sometimes they'll even draft the legislation themselves and then hand it to the senator for the senator to introduce. They also provide information. So remember, members of interest groups, they're very involved in their issue. So they are often very knowledgeable and have a lot of information and education on the topic. So sometimes they'll testify at congressional sessions and be able to provide information so that members of Congress can vote on certain laws based on what's given. Sometimes they make campaign contributions. So, for example, if a candidate's running for office and they care about the same issues that you care about, and you're a member of an interest group, you can make a donation to that candidate to try to get that candidate to win so that they can advance your cause. So that happens very often. So Congress is usually the first step of what an interest group will try to lobby. And if they're unsuccessful, then they move on to the other branches. Interest groups do try to lobby toward the executive branch. Keep in mind, though, that meeting the president himself is probably unlikely. It's very difficult. He's very busy, so it's not easy to get a meeting with the president. It can happen, but not often. But lobbyists will try to meet with the president or meet with cabinet members, meet with president's assistants or White House aides to try to get some attention for their issue. At the state level, they may try to meet with the governor. They may try to meet with like the mayor of a city or city, executive to, again, try to get laws changed in their favor, try to get more attention for an issue or more support. So this does happen. And also, lobbying the courts comes in the form of lawsuits. So what can happen is that if an interest group wants a law changed, they might be able to bring a lawsuit through the court system to try to get a law declared unconstitutional, or to try to get the courts to rule that a change needs to take place. So I put, for example, Brown versus Board of Education is a court case that we did already talk about. This was, again, the court case that required desegregation of schools and eventually led to desegregation of other public accommodations as well. This was a lawsuit that was actually taken to the court by a group called NAACP, that stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So this was, and still is, an interest group that focuses on helping the non-white population to support their causes and increase their rights and social standing. So basically this group, they were the ones that took this lawsuit to the court and eventually made a huge change through the court system. In addition to lawsuits, interest group members will also often file briefs, which are written statements to kind of try to persuade a judge to rule one way or another in a case. Or they try to influence the appointment of judges. So if there's an open seat in a federal court or a state court and a new judge is getting picked, they'll try to influence which judges get picked to be on the court, especially if they know a judge that is more likely to side with them in the future. Okay. And then, so some of the indirect methods are other ways that interest groups try to shape the public to get the public to care more about their issue. Okay, so one example is grassroots lobbying. So this is, instead of directly talking to a politician themselves, they might rely on letters, emails, phone calls, and so on to contact their senator or their representative to try to get them to listen to what their message is. They also work on trying to shape public opinion to try to get the public's attention on whatever their issue is. So they might use commercials, magazine ads, websites, flyers, buttons, bumper stickers, try to get celebrities on board, social media, whatever they can use to try to get the public to care about whatever that issue is, so that going into the next election, the public votes for the candidates who support that issue. Okay. Additionally, propaganda is persuasion techniques that try to get a person to adopt a particular mindset. It's used to try to change someone's mind or convince somebody of something. So propaganda does not mean trying to get somebody to see both sides of an issue. It means trying to convince somebody. So it usually starts with a conclusion. So for example, let's say we're working on like gun control. That's the interest group. So they'll start their advertising or their communications with a conclusion like guns are unsafe or guns need to be restricted more, and then kind of find whatever evidence supports their claim or their conclusion to convince the public of their opinion. Okay, here are some other techniques, such as using labels to try to get certain feelings or emotions associated with an issue, using name calling, different symbols, visuals. So I have some examples to show you. So here's some. So this one is like for a gun rights group. So you can see here it shows like a woman using a gun, so it shows that like everyone can use a gun, not just men. It shows that most they've gotten big letters, law-abiding gun owners, so kind of showing that most people with guns are not criminals. This one is from PETA, so it's People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. So this one kind of used a cute dog to convince you to not eat meat, so it's kind of playing on emotions and trying to get people to get feelings involved. This one has to do with energy. You can see they use red, white, and blue, so it's very patriotic. This is also very, it looks very much like President Obama's campaign posters that he was using, so it kind of like ties that in. Like when I see this poster, I think of President Obama, so it kind of like ties them together. So if you like President Obama, you should like clean energy as well. This one is an anti-abortion, anti-Planned Parenthood ad. So you can see like this is a tool that's used in abortion, so it's made to like provide a very strong visual. AARP, this one is the American Association of Retired Persons, so it's like a senior citizens group. So this one's focused on like Medicare, so you can see Congress. So they've got like the picture of the Capitol in the background to try to give again like that visual. This one uses President Obama, so this one is a support of Planned Parenthood. So it's basically showing like if you like President Obama, you should like Planned Parenthood. So it's kind of like linking him with it. All right, so then in addition to propaganda, electioneering is when members of interest groups try to get certain candidates to win elections. So, for example, in the upcoming presidential election, we're going to have two candidates, a Republican and a Democrat, going against each other, and they're going to each stand for certain issues. So then interest groups will figure out which candidate supports their interests or their issue, and then they're going to try to get that candidate to win. So they're going to donate a lot of money to different campaigns. And this is true not only at the presidential race, but also like at the state levels as well, for Senate races, the U.S. Capitol, local elections. Basically, interest groups looks to find what candidates are going to get their issues passed or their issues like more attention, and then they're going to try to donate or try to get or volunteer on campaigns or just anything they can do to try to get those candidates to win the office. PAC stand for Political Action Committee, so interest groups will take money from their members and will donate that money to campaigns. And that is it for chapter 9. So again, interest groups was pretty short. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, or if you would like to go over this more in detail, I'd be happy to go over this with you again. So thanks for listening.